with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, February 26, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Donald Trump arrives in Hanoi to denuke. Meanwhile, Cohen arrives on the Hill to nuke Trump. Today, a private Senate hearing. Tomorrow, a public House committee hearing. On Thursday, private hearing with the House Intel Committee. Meanwhile, Sanders explodes fundraising records. $10 million now over the first, really less than a week. Department of Homeland Security, Customs Patrol, Border Patrol to get grilled by Dems. The Senate will vote against Trump's state of emergency with the help of a few panicked Republicans. U.S. adds sanctions on Venezuela as Mike Pence insists the U.S. will stand by freedom. And Oakland teachers continue their strike. Supreme Court to take another look at that silly separation of church and state thing. Today is a special election in New York City for the public advocate. Go out, vote for Nomi Konst. And lastly, the Interior Department has issued 1,700 waivers to post-BP disaster safety rules. Enjoy your seafood while you can. All this and more on today's Majority Report. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, particularly for you pescatarians.
Oh, yeah. Matt Christman convinced me I should feel fine about being a pescatarian because we're the last generation that's even going to be able to eat fish. So,
that's right.
You know,
that's
getting while the noms are good.
Phase itself out. And probably now, I mean, I think to the extent that we get our shrimp from the Gulf Coast, comes complete with all the chemicals you need, all the preservatives you need without having to put anything into it. That's what's nice about that.
Yeah, it keeps you young.
Michael is back from his extended vacation.
I am back, and it was great. Vieques is an amazing place, and in that top line that you just did there, I definitely feel as if I've arrived back home. There's no more fish. Things are terrible. Trump is president.
Trump
Venezuela.
continues to be president.
Pence, Venezuela, democracy.
We got clips of Bernie Sanders' town hall last night, and you know the fact is he is the by really any measure the front runner, and I think things could change. I have a feeling there's did Jay Inslee jump into the race yet? I suspect he will. He's
Not
already
officially.
talking about the getting rid of the filibuster in the Senate, which is an odd thing for a governor to be talking about unless you're going to run for president.
He would focus on global warming. That would be his main area.
And we will talk maybe a little bit more about the protest with Dianne Feinstein yesterday. I mean, we mentioned it, and it is it's garnering perhaps maybe a little more attention than people would have anticipated, but it is, I think, it clearly is indicative of something that has struck a nerve, and because as we get closer to the potential of defeating Donald Trump and perhaps taking the Senate in 2020, climate change is going to reemerge as an issue that we can actually do something about. To some extent, it goes away during, climate change itself does not. The urgency does not. Obviously, it grows with time. It's less of a focus when there's a sense that you have completely controlled Republican government, because they will do nothing about it. Not just do nothing about it. They will actively fight against the reality of it. And as we get, now that we have a democratically controlled House, that's why that debate begins to heat up. And that's why it becomes largely an internal Democratic debate, because the Republicans are immovable on that accord. And ultimately, to the extent that climate change is going to be addressed in a timely fashion, they're going to have to be irrelevant to the equation. So the argument becomes between people in the Democratic Party, essentially, who will hopefully have a hold of levers of power, and how seriously they will take this. And that's why pushing Dianne Feinstein to swing for the fences, when we already know that there's not going to be any runs scored until Democrats take control. She's up there saying, look, what we're going to do is we're going to try for a single, because I've been here for 30 years and I know the best we can do is a single. But the fact of the matter is, it's not going to mean anything either way. Everything we're doing now about climate change, every argument we're having about climate change, is for what can be done when Democrats take control. So when Dianne Feinstein says, like, I can get something passed, it's irrelevant anyways. Passing something with the Republicans today is irrelevant. The Interior Department just rolled back 1,700 or provided 1,700 waivers for safety regulations following the BP disaster. There's no part of the Trump administration or the Republican governance that is going to actively engage in climate change. So the places to fight about this are within the Democratic Party. And I guess also on The View, where Meghan McCain has a really interesting take on this. I want you to just, before you hear her take on this, I'm just going to say her name to you, and I want you to think about that. Her name is Meghan McCain.
What the hell? I love Dianne Feinstein now. I loved everything about it, and I'm in the minority on this. I really hate when people use children as political props in general. What I thought of, thank you very much, is that there was a kid named Jonathan Crone who spoke at CPAC in 2009, and he was like the new young conservative voice, and he made cable appearances, and later on, as an adult, he said he was naive. He was just saying the stuff he had heard for a long time. He also said, I shouldn't have done that speech. It was a bad idea. Later on, as an adult, and I think children have to be able to grow up and make their own political decisions about what they want. And anyone shaming Dianne Feinstein, she has been doing this 30 years. And if you don't like it, she also said in that, I won by a 1 million vote margin. I don't agree with her politically, but she makes a lot of good points.
She's talking about basically the things you have to go through. But, you know, I would make just one point about this, because years ago during the AIDS crisis, Larry Kramer was on my show. He was the person who did ACT UP and really went after people about AIDS, medical help, etc.
Is he a child?
No, he was a grown-up, Larry Kramer. He's a famous activist. And he was going after Elizabeth Taylor. Now, Elizabeth Taylor was a pro-activist. She was one of the champions in the AIDS crisis, and he was going after her. And I said, why are you picking on her? And he said, because if I go after the antis, nothing gets done, I can at least make a dent when I'm talking to someone on our side. And Dianne Feinstein has an incredible record on climate change.
Yeah.
So yes, go to her, because if you go to that guy Inhofe who's holding a snowball and thinks that makes the point about global climate change, you're going to get nothing out of it. And Trump, same thing.
I actually think that kids today know a lot about climate change, and they are the ones that are going to be directly affected by it. My kids know a lot about climate change. They know a lot about recycling, and I think you give them short shrift if you say, you know what, they don't know enough, they should keep their mouth shut. I think my daughter Paloma is 12 years old, and she could give Dianne Feinstein a list of reasons why she should vote.
And they're the
for
ones who are going to be affected.
I don't know that they're necessarily being used as props, and I don't like the way that she engaged
I've been
with
on
them.
the other end of it, as has Abby, and this is a common cheap trick. Using a kid as a prop, I never like it. I never have.
It did feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So in other words, the two people who are sitting at that table because their dads were
I was going to
politicians.
say, and with that, I would like to announce that I'm leaving The View.
Right, exactly. I know Jonathan Crone. We had him on the show, actually, back 4 or 5 years ago.
A couple of months before I started, and I remember going through the archives and being like, well, that's one of the more bizarre interviews. But it was actually
I remember
great.
talking about him on Break Room Live and mocking him. And I think the problem that Megyn is having is that she's finding out that on the right, they use the kids as props. And, you know, kids are used as props in all sorts of contexts. But in this instance, these kids, it really is their future. And you don't need to be a scientist to make the case that we have a urgent need to address climate change, because the overwhelming number of scientists who study this stuff have made that case. So you can just simply rely on the 97% of scientists who weigh in on this, and you don't need to be a scientist yourself. And Dianne Feinstein has probably done no more reading than I would imagine some of the parents who were with those kids about this stuff.
Definitely. And it's also just such a, I'll be on brand for a second, and I'll mention South Africa. There's a thing in, there's the ANC Youth League, right? Like the civil rights movement was powered by, teenage and younger activists. So like, it's very funny that the conception
she's just
is
being
either,
disingenuous. I mean,
she's
honestly,
being totally. But more broadly, there's an important point here too. That like, not only is young people in politics not a prop necessarily, it's actually powered some extremely significant things, and it's going to need to on this, because they're literally like, we are to a much higher degree than Dianne Feinstein, and if you're 14 to a higher degree than us, live on this planet that's being made uninhabitable.
Say that about the Parkland
well, right.
students?
That's another great example.
Of course not. I mean, yeah, so these kids were like 5 to 6 years younger. But the issue is the message they was bringing is fairly straightforward. And so Meghan McCain may have issues with the way that she was used as a prop at different times, which perfectly legitimate. She should write another book about it. But
I would love to read that book.
Good for Joy Behar too, for making the point that you protest people you have leverage with. There may be some modicum of value to protest people you have no leverage with, but it is really just more for your own well-being and to make yourself feel good. But you protest on issues where you want legislation with legislators who, on some level at least, are within the ballpark of needing to listen to you.
And all of the things
or are supposed to at least pretend that they have to listen to you, right?
Well, I mean, Dianne Feinstein did not like to be in that situation. Even if she's not gonna run for re-election or whatnot, but the bottom line is she feels some pressure from that, because somewhere in her social circle, somewhere in her political operation, there are people who are susceptible to that type of pressure. And if she wasn't, she would have just locked the door and not had them come in at all. Yeah. And so they feel the pressure certainly more from there, than had they gone down to Jane Inhofe's office. Definitely. And, there's a certain amount of some psychology in it. Otherwise, she just, Dianne Feinstein can't possibly be like, I just got to watch my back as a re-election.
Dianne Feinstein also, in the ways where everybody's sort of praising her for breaking down supposedly how the world works to these kids, is indicting why the world as it is constituted does not work.
I've been here for 30 years and we've done nothing on this.
Incredible. That is the most and I do have to say, this is a pernicious problem with Democratic Party leaders, because unfortunately Republicans have accomplished a lot, for destruction. But you have all of these Democrats running around saying, I've worked on this for decades. Well, okay, well, let me apply a little market logic to that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, think about your life. Think about your choices.
Folks, do you remember 1989? I do. That was the year the World Wide Web was invented. We've come a long way since then. So why does it feel like the software you use every day at work is stuck in the past? Take a leap into the future by finding the right software for your business on Capterra.com, the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solution for your business. With over 700,000 reviews of products from real software users, Capterra has everything you need to make an informed decision. Search more than 700 specific categories of software, from project management to email marketing. No matter what your business needs, Capterra makes it easy to discover the right solution fast. I don't have it up in front of me right now, but I literally go onto that site just to think about other jobs that maybe I could get.
I remember.
It has.
We've discussed this. You're like, oh my God, I could manage a ballet studio.
It's true. I would say, I don't know that I really am well suited for a ballet studio per se, but I think they have literally they have software for every. These are just the categories. They have church management research, event management research, field service, HR, finance, legal, medical, nonprofit, marketing, retail, field service. I don't even know what that means. CMS, CRM. They probably have both. Check it out, folks. Any type of software, any type of business you have, if you're thinking about starting a business, gives you ideas based upon, and what it basically does is it's just a clearinghouse for all sorts of different software for these companies, organized in such a fashion you can find it quickly, and reviews for each one of the different softwares for that industry. Visit Capterra.com/majority for free today to find the right tools to make 2019 the year for your business. Capterra.com/majority. That's Capterra, CAPTERRA.com/majority. Also, as you know, hiring is challenging. Managing is challenging too. Just keeping track of different people's schedules. Very difficult.
You know that?
But there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. That's what happened to Brendan. That's how he got here. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates, so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get quality candidate through the site within the first day. We got a bunch of people I interviewed from that day, as well as, I don't know, I think we were up for 2 weeks. Literally. I think we had 150 people that we looked at. And ZipRecruiter allows you to organize it. It's made it super easy. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter, ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. So it was announced well, I guess we had mentioned it and sort of teased it yesterday, but the full numbers came out yesterday in terms of Bernie Sanders fundraising. And the reason why, we're getting stuck on this and I don't know, we're talking about it too much, but Bernie is clearly the fundraiser. I mean, excuse me, the front runner. And the real question was going to be that I think a lot of people had, at least in some quarters, how much of Bernie's support was a function of him being essentially the only other candidate in the race with Hillary Clinton. Yes, Martin O'Malley was there, but he did not necessarily have the charisma or the foundation to make a name for himself in that race. And so the real question is how much was Bernie Sanders a reaction to Hillary Clinton, or how much of it was proactively Bernie Sanders? He got 43% of the vote in the primary election. And look, if we had a presidential election where one candidate got 55% of the vote and the other one got 43% of the vote, that is a landslide. I mean, that would be a landslide. Now, it's the dynamics in the Democratic Party are a little bit different than the nation at large. So, the Democratic Party is not nearly as polarized. And the dynamics as to why you vote for someone in a primary are a little bit different than they are in terms of a general election. But 43% of the vote, that's a lot of vote. If he could retain, the question is, how much of that 43% would he retain? Does he have the ability to build on that? Because one of the things that Hillary Clinton had in her favor was a sense, turned out to be not necessarily correct, but that she was a sure bet. She would definitely win. And a significant percentage of voters, probably in both parties, vote for someone in a primary who they think has the best chance of winning in the general election. Obviously, a certain, significant percentage of people who voted for Hillary Clinton, she was her first pick, regardless of what they perceived as her ability to win. So the real question with Sanders was going to be, how much of that support would he retain on day one? And the numbers are in, and they're pretty stunning. I mean, we know what the polls say, but that's all well and good. Sanders collected $10 million from 360,000 donors. It's an extraordinary number. I think his total donor list in, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016 was 2 million. But that was over the course of a year and a half long campaign. To have 20% of those people show up on day one is nuts. And here's what's interesting about that, too. 39% of those donors used an email address that had never been before used to give to Mr. Sanders. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that there's 40% new donors. Some people, I gave money when I was in college 3 years ago, and now I gotten rid of my college email address. Or, I finally got off of Hotmail, or, my email account got hacked, whatever it is. There's always some churn. But even if that's half, even if 20% of the people are brand new donors, it's incredibly impressive. $10 million. And just to compare it, Sanders got $230 million in his 2016 primary. So he has already gotten about 5% of that total. A little bit less, maybe. But significant portion of those people committed to almost 50,000 donors have agreed to give Sanders a reoccurring donation.
Oh, yeah. I signed up for $6 a month because I'm a bro.
Well, there you go. $1 million a month each. So there's another almost, 15 million off the top. I mean, it's pretty stunning. So you start off in the first week with already essentially having raised 10% of your total from 2016, which is it's stunning. Elizabeth Warren, 20 times what Elizabeth Warren did on her first day. Kamala Harris did 1.5 million on their first day.
And I think a lot of the other ones, have they even released it? Because I think some, according to a piece I read last week, a lot of the candidates have not released these numbers, and presumably they would release them if they looked good.
Yeah, and some are divined. I mean, these fundraisers have a notion. They have a calculus they can tell what other campaigns are doing close anyways. And here's the amazing part. So there was 20 donors out of the 360,000 who maxed out. It's crazy, which means that there were officially 359,914 donors. So 359,894 can give again.
And I just want to say two quick things. One is well, I'm not going to say it's petty. I'll just say you owe me $5 from the bet with Perrine when I predicted Bernie would run, and you did not.
Yeah, all right.
But the second, more important point, I think, is I think Bernie's campaign so far, and I know we'll get to it, has been, I think, certainly not from like places like MSNBC and CNN mostly, but from people like Bill Fletcher Jr. as an example. There was valid criticisms of Bernie, which I think they're responding to. And I also like the idea that even that he's told his supporters like to basically be chill online,
right,
which I think is good for him. We'll get to that. But I just want to say that I guess the big takeaway, though, is like, this is also just like, listen to what people say. People are excited about this guy because of the agenda. I mean, there's a reason there's durability here.
Yeah, and I think this is at least indicative that his the support for him was not merely a reaction to Clinton. Surely some of it was, and other people are going to go to. Some of those former Bernie supporters are going to end up going maybe to other candidates. Who knows? I mean, the question has been, how much of that 43% would he retain? Could he build on it? I don't know that you need to build on it in a race this big.
With this many people. Also, it's a historical tragedy for Hillary Clinton, but I feel like she actually had both experiences, because I think in 2008, it was about, like, there wasn't really any difference between her and Obama in terms of policy, but it was like, we need something really different here. And also Iraq was a really big deal. But It was very stylistic. It was very generational. It had a lot to do with where you stood. And don't forget, I mean, because her campaign then under Mark Penn was, they put out memos saying, like, Barack Obama, like, Indonesia as a kid, save that for 2040. Like, they ran on some very nativist stuff. But I think 2016 was definitely the real sign coming out of Black Lives Matter and Occupy and the living wage movements. Like, no, you got to start delivering for people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of young people who supported Obama in 2008 are supporting Bernie for a lot of the same reasons after being very disillusioned by Obama.
And I think we'll have a better sense of that as we go on. But clearly, what is I think these numbers have got to scare you if you're working on another campaign. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. I can only imagine right now what Howard Schultz is sitting in a bunker somewhere, surrounded with people who are making millions of dollars to tell him that he can win. saying,
soon we'll be having
I've
conversations
got to do this. I've
with
got to do this.
Teal about like actual bunkers, and it's going to be very disturbing.
Get me another double espresso. We're going to do this.
I need a thinking session.
So $10 million in less than a week is super impressive. And then last night, Sanders did a town hall, and I was watching to see, because, it's funny. This wasn't quite February of 2015, but it was in the summer of 2015 when 2 or 3 protesters from Black Lives Matters basically rushed the stage at Netroots Nation. And I remember there was a lot of Bernie supporters who were upset about this. And from my perspective, and I think we shared this when we were talking about this, Michael, was that this was a good thing for Sanders because he clearly had very little experience in speaking to the concerns of African Americans in this day and age. And it was early enough in the campaign where he'd have the opportunity to adjust. And I don't know. And while I think to a certain extent he probably grew a little bit in that respect, I don't know that in the context of the campaign that he had enough time to understand. I mean, I think, look, he has a very good record in terms of civil rights, but I also think that we're in a different era and there's different sensitivities. And so this was, I thought, one of the best answers he gave, at least in the context of this question last night. There was another question where it was slightly addressed where I don't think he did quite as well. But this one I thought he did very well, and I'll show you why, too.
To an important question.
We have a question from Noel Osama. He's a policy analyst here in Washington.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. There's a deep sense of mistrust for you by some within the African American community. Many feel you undermined Secretary Clinton after her nomination by not showing enough support, and which contributed to President Trump being elected. Along with that, many also feel that you are at times racially insensitive, and by virtue of your background, don't reflect their experience enough. How do you address these concerns, and what's your approach to winning their votes?
Well, first of all, I reject the first premise that you made. I knocked my brains out. In fact, I just saw a letter today from Hillary Clinton, which said, "Thank you, Bernie, for working so hard in my election." All right. We went to state after state. I think we had 35, 40 rallies in all of the battleground states. So I do not accept for one moment that I did not do everything that I could. And then people say, well, some of your supporters voted for Trump. True. But some of Hillary's supporters in 2008 voted for McCain. That's the reality. More of those did that than voted for me. Now, on the second point, okay?
Pause it for 1 second. I just want to add in here because this is going to come up in a different story. Apparently, over the course of the 3 months after the nomination to the election, that would have been October, September, and August, he did 39 rallies, 17 rallies in the last 7 days of the campaign. So that's pretty substantial number of rallies.
He worked quite hard for her. All right,
but let's continue.
Well, people are mad that he ran it all.
That's the reality. More of those did that than voted for me. Now, on the second point, okay, we ended up winning among younger people more votes from young African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans than Clinton and Trump combined. All right. Furthermore, if you look at the polling out there, we're doing quite well with the African American community. But let me just raise an issue here. Maybe I haven't been as strong on this issue as I should be. I talk about the fact that we have a nation of massive inequality. Okay, and I believe that. I think that's the most important issue we can talk about. But within that inequality, we have another inequality, and that is racial disparity. And it's important that everybody understands that. That means that the wealth gap between a white family and a black family is 10 to 1. If you are a black mother, the likely it is that you will have a baby that will die. Your infant mortality rate 2.5 times higher than a white mother. If you are a black businessman, I remember talking to a fellow in Milwaukee, black businessman, said, Bernie, I can't get a loan from the bank. And his business is pretty good because of redlining. Black kids are leaving college more deeply in debt than white kids. So we have an enormous amount of disparity in wealth, in education, in health that must be addressed. And I will work as hard as I can. Number one, to have a cabinet that reflects what America is. And number two, to do everything that I can in every way to end all forms of racism in this country.
And so, that
perfect answer.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly encouraging about that is that, look, you don't want to give somebody a cookie for doing stuff that is sort of like baseline, but saying that acknowledging that he could have done better on some stuff at one point. I can't remember the exact wording, but he says, I could have done better on this. Acknowledging that he could do better on it and indicating, that there is a specific element, whatever you believe to be the root causes, whether you believe that it's a function of class that drives racism or not, the reality, the lived reality of people of color in this country is that they may be subjected to the same class disparities, but there's a whole nother set of disparities that they have to deal with. And acknowledging that reality is, I think, crucial to, identifying them is crucial to dealing with them. And it's certainly not going to happen the other way. You certainly can't, not be aware and acknowledge those realities and hope to deal with them. I just don't think that's possible. So both from a substantive and a rhetorical standpoint, that's a huge upgrade. Bernie 2.0 there is a big upgrade, and that's good in that respect.
The reason I really liked it, though, is the way, you covered, obviously, the most important part, but the seamlessness of him being able to totally reject the first premise of that question, which we explained.
Well, yes. It's a separate question.
It's a separate, right. But it's inelegant to combine those two things. And it's actually a feat to pull off simultaneously saying that question's total BS. That other question's hugely important. And let me sort of get to it.
Yeah, the guy really pitched him a good question. I don't know whose side the DC policy analyst is on, but it worked out really well in the end.
Yeah, and I think, I think part of the, and I don't know if the question about Clinton is meant to be a surrogate question for his relationship to the Democratic Party, but like you said earlier, Michael, he's made a point of saying, show some respect to the institution. And part of the reason why I think, particularly in the context of older African Americans, I think we said this yesterday, is that the Democratic Party means something to them because of the material benefits that I think particularly older African Americans are aware of relative to, their lived experience. Republicans have made it really, have provided a very stark difference for particularly older African Americans in terms of sort of some very fundamental rights. To the extent that the Democratic Party, and there's certainly, has not been as strong as it could be. Even, going back to Social Security, let's say, that stuff is a little bit more subterranean. But the Republicans have been very, very explicit in their hostility to people of color.
And even for what it's worth, like I don't want to get into the whole New Deal and Roosevelt, and obviously it goes without saying that there was huge compromises and racism built into negotiating with Southern Democrats, like you said. But there's also the reality that under Roosevelt, there was actually a big shift in the African-American vote towards Democrats. So even in that time, actually, yes, this was the party that on a relative scale was doing a hell of a lot better, and that was registered in support.
All right, so here's another question that Bernie got, and it is a similar question. It came earlier. It is, and I think he didn't do as well with. He did well with part of this question, not so well with one of the premises, and so there were a couple of stories of what appeared to be narrow instances of sexual harassment on the campaign in 2016. This is every campaign, as far as I can tell, had the same problem. Clinton had someone very high placed in her campaign, I guess, who was accused of similar. But his response here makes it clear. My understanding is the campaign is taking this extremely seriously. But there was another part, and I think he addressed that well. There was another part of this question that I didn't think he did as well.
Shadi's from Denver.
As we saw in the 2018 midterms, the Democratic Party has become more female, more racially diverse, and younger in age. How can a voter like me feel confident in your ability to represent the party, especially given that your response to sexual harassment allegations during your campaign is that you were, quote, a little bit busy running around the country trying to make the case to be elected as president?
Well, I think that quote was a little bit out of context. But let me ask you a question. I am enormously proud of the fact that we have the most diverse, progressive freshman class in the history of the United States Congress. And you know what I did in 2016 and in 2018? I ran all over this country to try to make that happen. All right, so when you talk about the political revolution, you're talking about two things. Number one are the ideas that we are fighting for. An economy that works for all, not just the 1%. But the second point that I have made over and over again is we're not going to be able to implement a progressive agenda unless millions more people get involved in the political process. So I am delighted. We started an organization called Our Revolution. I think Nina Turner is here. You know what the purpose of Our Revolution was about? Is precisely to bring young people into the political process. And I think we're making some real progress.
But what are you going to do, Senator, to make sure that the allegations that occurred against your campaign a couple of years ago are not repeated? What are you personally going to do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Pause it for 1 second. All right, so because he does much better with this question in terms of the sexual harassment. But the problem that Bernie has in addressing that first part of the question is, regardless of whether you think the premise is important or not, the fact of the matter is the party is far more diverse and dynamic and changing. I don't know if it's changing as rapidly as much as there's a greater awareness of the party being made up of a vast majority of people, a diverse group of people. But he has to acknowledge that that's the case. He has to acknowledge that I am aware that when Democrats win, they lose the white vote. And when Democrats win, they always lose the old white man's vote. And we're going to have to rely on people who look like this woman to win. And he has to acknowledge the reality of that. And then simply say, and then go on with the rest. There cannot be any defensiveness about that because you're not fooling anybody. She asked about people of color, about women, and he responded with young people. And he's got to address the question. And he's got to do exactly what he did later in the broadcast in response to some criticism that he's gotten in the African American community. More specific criticism. But he's got to be able to do that because he, I think, has the confidence that his policies are going to help across the board. And the reality is he's an old white guy. And he's obviously not going to get any younger. and he's not going to get any less white. And so he's got to just acknowledge it and move on. And but for day 2 of the campaign or day 6 of the campaign, I think he's in pretty good shape. And then this, I think, was very good because they clearly have a specific apparatus that they have developed or developing to deal with sexual harassment on the campaigns.
A couple of years ago are not repeated. What are you personally going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Let me tell you what we have done and what we are doing. I was very upset to learn what I learned. When I ran for re-election in Vermont in 2018, we instituted, I think, maybe the strongest protocols against sexual harassment, and that will be the protocols we bring into the 2020 presidential election. Every employee of mine in this campaign will get significant amounts of training to understand what sexual harassment is about. Anybody who feels harassed will have an independent entity to speak to outside of the campaign, and we have hired some of the best people in the country to help us on this issue. We take this issue very, very seriously.
I think this is I don't think campaigns have had to deal with this in the past. Women have had to deal with it probably the entire time. Campaigns themselves have not had any type of formalized apparatus, as far as I can tell, to deal with any, employee issues like of this ilk. They just haven't felt like they needed to. And it's good that they now realize they do. And there should be formalized systems for people to deal with this stuff. And it's good. I frankly think every campaign, we should be able to go to their website and see what their, obviously not the specifics, or it shouldn't be too granular, but we should see, like, hey, this is a process that we have that is institutionalized within the context of our campaign. We have, some form of human resources function to deal with this, because inevitably stuff like this comes up in the context of campaigns. Lastly, what's the third clip is Venezuela. But let's go to let's do just Venezuela one more time. We'll finish off this the town hall, and then we'll go back to the Tucker. But right now,
the Tucker.
Yeah, the Tucker. U.S. government yesterday instituted new sanctions on Venezuela. We've already had fairly crippling sanctions on Venezuela since really the beginning of 2017, instituted in part, I think, by the Obama administration. Now, it really depends on who you talk to as to whether this was the catalyst for problems in Venezuela, or more like an accelerant. And my sense is it's an accelerant just because of the timing of stuff. But timed with that, I think there was also within Venezuela, private industry who also wanted to add an accelerant to this. The whole idea being that maybe they can collapse civil society in Venezuela and weaken Maduro. Bernie Sanders has been criticized, and his foreign policy apparatus within the context of his campaign have been criticized for parroting the administration lines that Maduro is undemocratic, that he's problematic, et cetera, et cetera.
Don't forget authoritarian.
Authoritarian.
Which is the word imperialists love to use to discredit socialist governments in Latin America.
Yeah, but I think there is, undeniably a strong argument that Maduro has been somewhat undemocratic. There is, I think, wide acceptance that his election was highly irregular.
Not his first one. So
second one, right?
Second
the re-election.
one. Yeah.
The re-election, highly irregular. There's a lot of people who argue that his move to dissolve the Constitution, also highly problematic.
He ran on a platform of creating a new constitution and won.
I would just say, can I just say something really quick on this? Because maybe we can tease it out. But I would just say, like, Ava Gollinger, who I do respect and I've done a lot of stuff with, is not only is she close, I mean, she literally was a legal advisor to this government. And in her book, you know, she concludes, and she's extremely aware of what the United States is doing and some of the elements of the Bolivarian movement that Maduro has clashed with, of course, now critically supported. But she basically says at the end of the book, like, I'm not going to go into details, but, like, yeah, the corruption is incredibly deep and it's really gone off the rails, including, like, putting contracts on people. So there's actual problems there.
Yeah, so I mean,
and that's not the front burner at all of the conversation right now, but it doesn't, you know, we don't need to paint a fake rosy picture to oppose an invasion.
Exactly. But there's criticism there that that articulating those ideas, though, is you're simply parroting what the CIA is saying as a way of laying a predicate for going to war or some type of, like, various forms of either military or aggressive other types of intervention. Now, of course, when we have a sanctions regime that we have now against Venezuela, we're already being, highly interventionist. And so there's some who say that it's not enough to be simply against the military intervention. Here is Bernie addressing that question, and it still won't be satisfying to some on the left, because it is acknowledging that there are problems with Maduro, and some people don't want to do that.
We have another question. I want to bring in Chanel Saldana, student at American University here in Washington. She's from Pittsburgh.
Good evening. In light of the recent events in Venezuela, you came out against U.S. intervention, a contentious stance as many in Venezuela are currently suffering at the hands of Maduro through starvation and violence, and it is clear that he will not let humanitarian aid in. Under these circumstances and moving forward, do you have a clear position on U.S. intervention overseas, both economically and militarily, for nations that are under the regimes of these oppressive dictators?
Thank you. Good question. There are a lot of awful things happening in the world, and what's going on in Venezuela is terrible. The economy is a disaster. People are living in hunger and in fear. I strongly believe there has to be an international humanitarian effort to improve lives for the people. I think the evidence is pretty clear that the last election in Venezuela was not a free and fair election. And under international supervision, I want to see a free and fair election. But to answer your question, let me say this. I am old enough to remember the war in Vietnam. And I was as active as I could trying to keep the United States from going to war in Iraq. I was in the Congress at that point. And I am very fearful of the United States continuing to do what it has done in the past. As you know, or may know, the United States overthrew a democratically elected government in Chile and in Brazil and in Guatemala and in other countries around the world. So as someone who fervently believes in human rights and democracy, we have got to do everything that we can. But I think sometimes you have unintended consequences when a powerful nation goes in and tells people who their government will be. So my view is that whether it is Saudi Arabia, which is a despotic regime, or whether it is Venezuela, I think we have got to do everything that we can to create a democratic climate. But I do not believe in U.S. military intervention in those countries.
Why have you, Senator, why have you stopped short of calling Maduro of Venezuela a dictator?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the last election was undemocratic, but there are still democratic operations taking place in that country. The point is, what I am calling for right now is internationally supervised free elections.
I mean, I don't know how much better you could answer that question, or I should say from my perspective anyways. I mean, the idea that you can both say that like the situation there is bad. It is hard to get, it is hard to trust international efforts now. I mean, particularly in...
you cannot trust that aid convoy. That aid convoy is absolutely a Trojan horse for military intervention.
U.S. aid is just the CIA and has been condemned by the Red Cross for being too politically compromised.
But even an international response now is somewhat suspect because of what took place in Libya. But the problem is...
Thank you, Marco Rubio.
Oh, yeah, it's not like one of our own lawmakers tweeted a direct threat to kill Maduro.
Right. And let's be clear. The mandate from the UN had nothing to do with regime change. And to a certain extent, we may have, by blowing through the UN mandate, destroyed the ability for the UN to sort of respond in a measured fashion in these instances. And my support at the time for the Libya bombing anyways, was predicated on the idea that the UN had determined that there was an immediate narrow threat to of a genocide, of a mass killing in Benghazi. But when essentially the Western forces, the Allied forces, overstepped that mandate, we lost China and Russia for future such attempting to stop like an imminent threat. I don't think there's anything like that in Venezuela.
Right.
Certainly there's no threat to us.
Well,
but I don't think there's
I just think it's just, I know you're not saying this, but just because of how the propaganda machine is, it's like the harshest critique of Maduro that's based in reality is not even, it's in a just totally different universe than what was being alleged to have happened in Libya.
I don't see how anybody could look
it's
at what's
not even
going on
remotely
in
analogous.
Venezuela as like as more oppressive than what's going on in Saudi Arabia every single day that we don't talk about.
Or frankly more oppressive than what's being wheeled out, frankly, by Bolsonaro.
Right.
And also what's going to be more oppressive than, unfortunately, a very right-wing opposition. I mean, I think this is another thing, too, that people also just need to get used to. Situations where it's not like this isolationist, oh, it's over there, whatever, don't think about it. But there are definitely scenarios where there's no morally satisfactory outcome. And in some ways, the American need, I think that like, oh, well, what's our answer to this is problematic in and of itself.
This is
because
what
our
we went through with
answer is
Syria.
always coups and invasions and, in Latin America, right-wing dictatorships. So why don't we just ease out of this? And if you want to, as a citizen or in the actual NGO sector, try to have solidarity and support, great. I mean, people are still traveling to Venezuela now.
This was the same what we heard in Syria from like 2011, maybe 2012 for 3 or 4 years. And the answer is that just because something is broken does not mean that the United States can fix it. In fact, and this is the sort of the more sincere response to it, right? This is the less cynical version. Like, there's no intent for the United States to fix it. The intent is for the United States to have hegemony over the situation. But even if I was to take like the most sincere thing, which is that we want to help people, sometimes you just can't.
A finer point I'd like to see put on it, and the CNN town hall probably not the place for it, and I do think Bernie would be the best on this issue, but he talks about military intervention, and what about covert intervention or the CIA? Like, what about you as the president are you going to do to get the CIA under control?
Well, the real response should be, we're not going to intervene. We're not going to intervene militarily. We're not going to intervene, covertly. We're not going to intervene with the sanctions regime. Now, the problem with the sanctions regime is that there may be times where you would want to use sanctions, right? I mean,
yeah, in very targeted ways. I mean, the ones on Venezuela have been unremittent and punishing, and they have tried to.
And I'm unclear, like, as to why.
Well, then they can say it's a failed state.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Socialism doesn't work.
I mean, there's no.
I know that. But
Well,
I'm saying, like, I don't understand, like, what is the argument that we're trying to, like, what is ostensibly the justification?
Well, the ostensive justification, even under Obama, has been that Venezuela is some, like, unique
rogue.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's insane. And it was obviously under Chavez, it was, I mean, again, not that he didn't have his problems, but he absolutely not only won his elections, he crushed them and was
he
hugely
also
popular.
Was putting low-cost heating oil into the Northeast as some type of Trojan
giving
horse.
no interest loans to Haiti and helping people in the Caribbean. And that's
That's
where
gotta stop.
people do need to look at it and be like, no, obviously that's the part where, and I think actually, and I forget who made this point, it wasn't me, but I cannot recall the name. I think there is something with the illegitimacy of capitalism, or whatever, you know, a certain kind of faith in our system at home, and the way Trump is going to Miami and pulling up all of this, like, Operation Condor years politics. Because it's not just Venezuela. I mean, if they go into Venezuela, there's talk about pushing to Cuba. I mean, this is very, very aggressive.
I want that hotel.
And it has to do with that sort of getting back into that. Like, Trump supposedly always says, like, Panama was easy. Like, why can't Venezuela be like Panama? And as somebody said about the invasion of Grenada, it was great TV. And so, yeah, great precursor of Trump.
By the way, on the last election, the UN would have been there. They would have been there observing it, but the opposition petitioned them not to go because they did not want anyone to say that the election was legitimate. And also, it's really hard to find accurate information about this in the mainstream media. This is one of those situations where you're not going to find an unbiased source. So at least you should be reading alternative sources for balance.
Yeah.
Definitely Venezuela
I
analysis
so.
and
Sure.
so on. But I would say, and I think, but even people who are like Greg Wilpert, who helped found Telesur and whose wife is a Venezuelan ambassador, I think, to Ecuador, you know, and is at the Real News now, but he'll say, like, yeah, I mean, when Maduro didn't fix the exchange rate, that led to huge problems with capital flight and capital problems with this government. Like, you know, again, we can, of course, read alternatives, oppose imperialism, and the best critique inside the government comes from within, from people who are legitimately committed to that project.
Yeah.
But they're marginalized right now. That's the other truth.
Yeah. I've been trying to make this case to some of my leftist friends that Bernie is definitely the best viable presidential candidate we're going to get on this issue by a lot, while still acknowledging that, yeah, some of his tweets sucked, and maybe he knows it. Maybe he's playing a game. Maybe he just needs to learn more about it. But, you know, when you say, oh, you should be letting in humanitarian aid, you're ignoring the precedent that countries that want to overthrow your government, that aid is not just aid, you know?
That was really wrong stance in my view, like, substantively. But I think 100%. But I think some people are getting really off the like when Matt Duss tweets out the whole question of why you won't condemn a dictator is a game that Washington Hawks play to reaffirm interventionist status quo, and Bernie won't play it. That's like, calm down. There's a lot of really important work being done here by the Democratic frontrunner.
Right.
Like, that's a big deal. You would not have heard
to
him
have
say that in
a
2016.
Democratic frontrunner in any campaign say we were instrumental in overthrowing the government of half a dozen Latin American countries. I mean,
also the only one to speak on the Lula case,
Progress.
the Democratic frontrunner.
Wow.
Progress.
Wow. So maybe one way Bernie's going to distinguish himself this time around is also by his foreign policy.
Well, I mean, he started getting into, you need like even like initiate, but at least his acknowledgement of the history of the U.S. foreign policy has already been sort of like a dramatic change. All right, one last clip, because this is funny because this involved Tucker Carlson. There was a hit piece that was put out about Bernie. That was a really funny piece. I had mentioned earlier that Bernie Sanders attended 39 rallies in the last 3 months of, or in the general election, 3 months of in support of Clinton. 17 rallies in the last 7 days. There was a Politico piece put out that quotes 4 or 5, one named and the other anonymous, Clinton campaign staffers, saying that ex-Clinton staffers slam Sanders over private jet flights. And the story was that the Clinton people apparently were upset because Sanders wanted charter planes. And I'll just read a little bit from this Okay, so according to, here it is. I'm not shocked, says this guy, that while thousands of volunteers braved the heat and cold to knock on doors until their fingers bled in a desperate effort to stop Donald Trump, His Royal Majesty King Bernie Sanders, this is a quote, would only
Bernie's
deign,
very regal,
would only deign to leave his plush D.C. office or his brand new second home on the lake if he was flown around on a cushy private jet like a billionaire master of the universe, said Zach Petkanas, who is the director of rapid response for the Clinton campaign, who does not know the value of subtlety when trying to sound legit. And it comes out, the Sanders campaign preferred mode of travel quickly emerges as a point of tension, according to 6 former Clinton staffers and another source familiar with the travel. The senator ended up flying private. It's actually charter. I don't know what the distinction is, but on 3 separate. Now listen to this. Here we go.
That was
on 3 separate multi-day trips in the last 2 months of the campaign. All right, so 3 separate multi-day trips. Prior to working out the logistics of Sanders' travel, quote, our working assumption was that 90% of the time it would be commercial, said another person familiar with the matter. If he was trying to hop from city to city in a particular state and commercial didn't work, we were open to chartering a plane. So they anticipated 10% of his travel would be on charters. They have a quote from a Sanders spokesperson saying it would have been possible to do all this. And then later in the piece, they say, okay, Sanders held 39 rallies in 13 states on behalf of Clinton's campaign, according to Jones, 17 events in 11 states in the last week alone. Okay. Forget about that.
They were literally trying to kill him.
We actually have some numbers here. And I did some news. I did some math, I should say, which is news because I did some math. So 39 rallies, right? Presumably, let's just say 1 rally a day. They had 17 rallies in 7 days. So they did 2 and then 1 day, probably 3, 2 days, 3 over the course of those 7 days. So there were, you had 30 days of him actually going out, taking plane travel. Now it's back and forth. So it's really more, trips than that. But let's just say 30. He took a private jet on 3 days. Now, according to my math, 3 equals 10% of 30. In which case, what they anticipated, which was 90% of his travel would be commercial, actually happened. They wrote a 4-page story, ultimately, that Bernie ended up traveling by charter in the exact percentage that they assumed that he would.
Wow.
Wow.
I'd like to fly high plane. Put me in a socialist jet. I'll pretend to support Hillary, but it needs to be the best.
There you
go. Like if
Put
anything,
me in high planes, fly around here, take me from Vermont, any fucking where.
But this is what it's going to be. There's going to be a series of hit pieces from people who are upset or worried about Bernie, and and the narrative, apparently they're going to end up having to find another narrative because that they anticipated Bernie would only use chartered jets in support of Clinton's campaign 10% of the time, and then do an expose that shows that he used chartered jets 10% of the time is just not going to further the narrative.
Well, it's great that there are so many conflicting narratives against him, right? Because he's being attacked by the right and the center, and they don't tend to work together, those two sides. So, like, if anything, this is going to help him in the primary with people who are concerned that he didn't help Hillary enough.
Indeed. Now, the attack on Bernie for supposedly using chartered jets in support of campaigning for Hillary Clinton. Yes, he's attacked as supposedly a hypocrite to his socialism or democratic socialism, as he made a point of saying at the CNN thing the other night. But Tucker Carlson also enjoys it because it's more part of his, like, the elite are hypocritical.
This is a segment he wanted to do with Rutger Bregman.
Yeah, this is the one he wanted to do with Rutger Bregman, where it's like, oh, he'll tell you that we have a problem with global climate change, but he took a chartered jet.
Yeah, I bet he wears a coat in the winter, too.
Exactly. Here it is.
So they say it a lot. They demand that you repeat it. They require that you believe it. They attack you if you don't. Any evidence of doubt makes you a denier. But do they themselves believe it? That's an interesting question and rarely asked. When he was campaigning for Hillary Clinton in 2016, Bernie Sanders repeatedly demanded private jet access for himself and his entourage. Over the past 3 years, according to a report in Politico, Sanders has spent almost $350,000 on private flights. How can you justify that if you believe the world is ending because of climate change?
All right, so that's the premise. And so
it's like Entourage, Jeff Weaver, Bernie Sanders, Tad Devine. Jeff is Vinny. Or excuse me, obviously Bernie's Vinny.
So they Tucker brought on Mark Green. Not Mark Green. Adam Green. Oh my God.
Adam,
sorry,
Adam
Green,
like and respect,
friend of show, head of the PCCC or co-founder of the PCCC. I think is his title. And I think he's. I think they're Warren folk over there at the PCCC. But nevertheless, here he is basically telling Tucker, "You're ridiculous, Tucker." And Tucker is having a tough time lately with guests who don't agree with him. I feel like something's going on maybe with Tucker, that he's lost a step.
Am I hitting a wall?
The point is that if you believe that carbon emissions are destroying the earth, that's too many houses, that's too much consumption, that's too much carbon. You lead by example. Why is it the people who are trying to control my life and tell me what I can do and can't do and how many kids I can have don't bother to restrain themselves?
Again,
that's not silly. It's true.
It's silly. It's a fake hypocrisy argument. You're basically saying that, if you believe that Facebook has bad privacy policies, you shouldn't check Facebook every day. If you believe you want a better job, you shouldn't do
No, I'm saying if you think adultery is wrong, don't cheat on your wife.
If you believe in having a better economy
you attack other people
with tens of millions of jobs in the future in clean energy, of course he should spend the last few days of a campaign doing everything he can to fight for a Green Deal.
You should reduce your own emissions. No, it's really simple.
So
you should walk
reduce your own emissions. Should he walk from Vermont to D.C.?
Yes.
Should he walk from Vermont to D.C.? He should. You just said yes. You just said yes, he should walk from Vermont to D.C.? That shows the BS argument that you just described.
Okay.
Taking
you know
a car.
What you're doing? You are making excuses because all you want is power.
I've
You're
seen
exactly
you make better arguments. I've seen you make better arguments.
Pause it for 1 second.
That's the most amazing juxtaposition.
Look at Adam Green. All he wants is power. It's so obvious. So obvious.
It's just the sneering sociopath cable news star.
But like, what happened to Tucker,
earnest,
where he
liberal, like political?
This is like it's also like the best dressed, with all due respect, Adam, I've ever seen him. Like he did it. Like this is the power guy. Like all you want is power. That's why you decided to become a bold. Just start a group called Bold Progressive. Like,
and wear Target.
What happened
blazers.
to Tucker that he lost a step? Like that's where you go to like. After, like, if you feel completely, I mean, they always tell you this in parenting, right? Like, you don't go to like threaten to take stuff away because that communicates to the child that you have no power. And Tucker's doing that when he's like, all you want is to take over the world.
Did you hear how he shoehorned in having kids to that too? Like Maoist Bernie with the one-child policy.
Well, it's actually it's Green who wants to keep people from having children.
Exposing
from Vermont
You're
to DC.
exposing the shallowness
Anybody who
of
takes
your
a car,
own argument.
Anybody who takes any
This
plane
is idiotic.
Is it idiotic? You just said he should walk from Vermont to DC. Obviously, you don't believe that.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't believe
I'm sorry.
that. He's not a hypocrite
Okay.
for doing that.
I'm sorry, I can't
he
hear
believes
you.
in tens of millions of
Okay.
new jobs in the clean energy economy.
This is
What's wrong with that?
idiotic what you're saying because look, you will
just said
never
he should walk
hold
from Vermont to
yourself
DC.
or your leaders.
You just
repeat
said
your dumb
he should
talking
walk
point
from
once
Vermont
more.
to DC. I asked
All
if he should walk. You said yes. Come on, not a real argument.
You got me, Adam. You got me. You're a brilliant guy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We're gonna we have pictures apparently on this.
That, but unironically.
Oh my God, he was so mad. So mad. Unbelievable. There it is, Tucker Carlson. All right, let's just quickly check in with Adam Green. Adam? So, Adam Green, welcome to the show. You did a good job on Tucker Carlson. Was it fun?
Thank you. It was very fun. It was a blast.
Yeah, and do you anticipate that he will have you back again?
Probably no.
Right. All right, thanks, Adam. There you go. So we got word
Look at
from
power-hungry
there
Adam
we go.
Green
So,
right there.
Look at that.
It reminds me, Luke Mayville. There's a Freedom, Idaho. Luke Mayville, who's doing work to
Yes.
expand Medicaid. There's
That's right.
Medicare in Idaho.
Medicaid expansion, Idaho.
They're
Good friend
accusing him
mine.
of leading a band of agitators on Twitter. So
Right. No,
two scary
because-
guys.
Well, right, because what happened was that they passed it overwhelmingly through referendum, and now the Republicans in the state house are trying to kill it, which basically subverts the state constitution. And so Luke, who like teaches like John Adams at Columbia, is tweeting things like "respect the will of the referendum."
Agitators. All right, folks. I'm going to head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, your support makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com, and also Just Coffee. Michael, you didn't hear the story, but I visited Just Coffee
Oh, that's
last
exciting.
week. It was super exciting.
I hope you
and
sent all of our regards.
I sent all of our regards, but it was incredibly impressive to hear them talk about how their mission has so much to do with supporting the farms that they buy their coffee from. They if you want to sell your coffee to a any type of enterprise, you want to sell it to Just Coffee because they actually have a whole set of other values that beyond just making great coffee. So justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Today is Tuesday. Michael, coincidentally, got back just in time for Michael Brooks' show.
I was so tempted to book a ticket that would arrive like literally just in time for tonight.
I mean, more or less. Same.
Oh well, no, you're overplaying it.
More or less.
Sure. Tonight we are talking, of course, about what's happening in Venezuela. We're going over the cliches of foreign policy, what critical support means, doesn't mean. Also, Francois is going to join us. She is a Haitian American political analyst. So we're talking about the movements that have been taking place in Haiti this week, how they intersect with U.S. foreign policy in Venezuela as well. And, of course, Bernie's in the race, this new independence group in the U.K. It's going to be a really full, jam-packed, amazing show. Patreon.com/TMBS, or watch it on our freshly monetized YouTube channel. And also on the Majority.fm homepage, you can get your tickets to Left is Best West Coast Fest with Ana Kasparian, Big Woz, Nando, Vila, and the TMBS crew. It's our second live show at the Bootleg Theatre, April 20th. Tickets are going fast, folks. Hope to see you there.
Jamie.
Yeah, so this week on the Antifada, Sean recorded a kind of triple crossover episode with some of the folks from Swampside Chats and Brett from Revolutionary Left Radio, where they talk about communization theory and what, if anything, modern leftists can take from this controversial strain of thinking. We also have an episode with Corey Pine that's out now that is still quite good. And, you know, I don't want to take all the credit, but right after we released this episode, wherein we make fun of Jeff Bezos, his dick pics, his bad labor practices, the Amazon HQ2 deal was off. So, you know, correlation, causation, whatever. You be the judge. We also have an episode coming out tomorrow with Hamilton Nolan, formerly of Gawker, currently of Splinter News, where we talk about labor organizing in the media and beyond.
And Matt.
A literary hangover most recent episode is The Unparalleled Adventures of One Hans Fall. It's an early sci-fi. You don't have to have read it because you can listen to the entire thing along with us during the episode.
Sort of like a mystery science
1800. Mystery science, yeah.
Nickelodeon.
Shakespeare's Globe.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danergy's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danergy.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck 'em.
Almost says what?
Almost
says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total
Pussy.
Take a leap into the future with Capterra.com, the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solutions for your business. With over 700,000 reviews of products from real software users, Capterra can help you make an informed decision no matter what your business needs. Visit Capterra.com/majority for free today to find the right tools to make 2019 the year for your business. Capterra.com/majority. Capterra. That's CAPTERRA.com/majority. Go there, check it out. I've spent just an abnormally long time just fishing around software that just because I'm fascinated it existed. Let's go to the IMs. We also got that Rubin one right there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. That one. Megan McCain Birdbrain. Michael, welcome back. Show is not the same without you. Sam, with respect to Bernie, I'm hearing a lot of performative, not another old white guy proclamations against my annoying liberal peers, some of whom supported him in 2016. What's the best way to combat this racist, ageist way of thinking? Well, I would start with to not perceive it as racist or ageist. It seems to me that it is, I mean, I don't think it's a deeply thoughtful criticism, but I don't think the vast majority, if you will check chapter 2 of my book, Blame the Electorate, of the electorate actually thinks that thoughtfully about this stuff. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of reason to say, like, I don't want an old white guy to be president again.
There's some ageism going on, though. Come on.
I don't think so.
All the people who are like, oh, he's so old.
Oh, there's...
Well, listen, you can say he's so old, but the fact is like, I don't think there's a question. I mean...
Younger than
that
when Nelson Mandela took the presidency.
I don't think it's a question of his capacity as much as it is that there is a sense that this is what we've had for presidents, the vast majority of our presidents have had this profile. And like I say, I think it's a superficial assessment, but I don't think that it's ageism or racism.
Yeah, I guess we could disaggregate the ageism from the other stuff.
And I think what you say is that's the case, but I also happen to think that his policies are going to provide the most opportunities for the type of diversity we want in the future. I mean, Barack Obama's winning of the presidency did not, it certainly made a difference, I think, probably to all, like, young people in particular, and to, I think a broad range of Americans in terms of what's possible in this country. And I think that was helpful. But from a material perspective, I think there's an argument that it didn't help one whit. And so I think the idea is that it would be great if Stacey Abrams was positioned like Bernie Sanders and had Bernie Sanders policies, but these are the options that we have. And of those options, I think, in terms of the most transformative change brings about other transformative changes. And so I think from that perspective, that would be my argument. I mean, I think there's a perfectly legitimate reason to say, like, we need, it is helpful for a multitude of people in society to see someone like themselves rather than someone who is quite similar, at least, on the surface, being a president. I mean, I'm quite convinced the reason why we have marriage equality today was simply because of Will and Grace or Ellen. I think that we probably I think that growing up today, gay as a child is far less traumatic. Maybe it's not even traumatic at all in some instances, broadly speaking, relative to the way it was like 30 years ago, because there were public role models. I think that's...
Oh.
It's not dumb to care about representation, right? Like, I, too, would love to see a woman president. I think it's bad that we haven't had one yet. But, and like all things being equal, I would much prefer someone who's not a white man. But all things are not equal, and there's nobody else with the policies that Bernie has and the perspective that he has. So that's where I'm at.
Right. Elbja, McCain's right. Kids shouldn't have to protest and get arrested to push adults to do something about climate change. Adults should do something about climate change so the kids' futures aren't effed. Waterboard from Kashmir. Does anyone else think Lion King's message is kind of messed up? What is Mufasa teaching Simba by saying all land the light touches will be yours? Sounds like he's teaching feudalism. And the whole story about circle of life, about lions eating animals and providing fertilizer for grass to grow for the prey, sounds like organic free-range version of trickle-down economics. I mean, the lions are on top of the food chain. They're on top of the pyramid. Why?
Mike Racine did a bit about this on his podcast.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that sounds like somebody workshopping a stand-up bit.
Yeah, he literally did like him holding him up and like I don't remember the movie.
Sounds like Ronald Reagan's probably taking somebody's material.
Wait, Ronald Reagan, I am that.
Well, I don't know. It's Waterboard from Kashmir, but I got to think that right now Ronald Reagan is probably watching Lion King with his kids. I think we're around that time. I'm just.
I see.
I'm
No,
guessing.
it was just.
It's a guess.
It was funny. No, they did the whole bit of like him holding him up and surveying the kingdom, and I forget like what the bad animals were in that movie, but him being like, Simba, you can't help them because that will only make their problems worse.
Scar was right.
Turn up Bega. Sam, I think it's important that we point out substantive distinctions between Bernie and Warren. One of those is that I feel Warren's political ideology is somewhat muddled. For instance, if you believe there is a wealth inequality problem in this country and that we should combat that by building various entitlement and welfare programs, and you go ahead and vote to raise the military budget by $700 billion over 10 years, then I worry about where you stand. I mean, I think there's an argument that you're saying that extra $70 billion could have gone to other things. I mean, I think there's an argument that you could do both, but I know that the end progressive tax rates are the most integral part of getting the programs we want, but cutting military spending is also important and a moral imperative. I think the progressive tax rates, I mean, I'm not sure exactly, but they're not just to raise money. They are to
reduce the power
reduce
of capital
inequality.
class.
Yeah. Meghan McCain's baby fat. I think you guys might be underestimating the challenges a child prop like Meghan goes through growing up. Meghan's seemingly lack base of historical facts and knowledge can be directly correlated to the number of campaign stops and photo shoots she went on. After all that sacrifice, what does she have to show for it? Speaking of campaign props, you know, this is who was she talking to?
I'm not sure. Sorry, it's not on the sheet. I couldn't.
You know, Ivanka sat down with the dude from Fox News Digital, and
the dude from Fox.
You know, that guy. Milo's friend, Steve Hilton. Yeah, Steve Hilton, that guy, and she sat down to just talk about what she's learned on the campaign trail. I don't have a description.
Is he a Hotel Hilton? Oh, this isn't on the sheet.
Yeah, here we go.
You've got people who will see that offer from the Democrats, from the progressive Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Here's the Green New Deal, here's a guarantee of a job. And think, yeah, that's what I want, that's simple. What do you say to those people?
I don't think most Americans in their heart want to be given something.
Pause.
What about you?
Wait. Put aside, look, listen, we can go with the low-hanging fruit here.
Okay.
That she works for her dad. And almost every single job she has had is either worked for her dad. No. I'm sorry. Let me recalibrate that. Every single job she has had either is working for her dad or a job that she got because of her dad. So she's answering the question, what the Green New Deal is going to have a job guarantee. A job guarantee. And she's saying, I don't think Americans want to be given something like a job. I, for one, I would also not like to have a job. But go ahead.
In their heart, want to be given something. I've spent a lot of time traveling around this country over the last 4 years. People want to work for what they get. So I think this idea.
She didn't even hear, you didn't even listen to the guy's question. It's a job guarantee. That's what they're going to do. They're going to work. But they don't like to be given a job. I think
You wanted
people
work
should
to
have
get
to
a job.
work to get a job.
None of these kids have his charisma. It's incredible.
But I've been traveling a lot around. Good.
What they get. So I think this idea of a guaranteed minimum is not something most people want. They want the ability to be able to secure a job. They want the ability to live in a country where there's the potential for upward mobility.
What?
Nailed it, babe.
Now, I'll tell you something. Honestly, the Fox News digital guy, you got to give him credit for just like, maybe they don't cut back to him for a reason because he's just sitting there going like,
That was all they uploaded.
that's not what I said. That's not the question. That's okay. There it is,
Guaranteed
folks.
minimum, yeah.
There it is.
Hand up, not a
Our
hand
next
down.
president of the United States after Donald Trump. Let's go
Don't
to
speak that into existence.
Let's go to since we're with the dim-witted. Apparently, Dave Rubin is in Sydney, Australia. He's having a conversation with John Anderson, and
Is there an American politician named John Anderson?
yeah,
That
he
was-
ran for.
okay.
He was a independent who ran in.
1980.
I think it was Carter and Reagan.
Okay, but different dude.
Different dude. They're in Sydney. Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin. Dave is going to explain what's going on with the left now, okay? Because the left, it's like they think they're oppressed, but they don't know what real oppression is.
Why do we walk away from people we can trust warning us of the consequences?
Well,
of
I think there's an
ignoring
interesting reason for that sort of brings the Solzhenitsyn story into 2019, which is that he was truly oppressed. This was a life of actual oppression, right? Now we have people that are walking around, everyone in this room has this in their pocket. And if you have this in
Pause
your
it.
pocket...
I should tell you that he's pulled out not a card that says, I'm not oppressed. He's pulled out a cell phone.
Room has this in their pocket. And if you have this in your pocket and you
turned
think,
off, I hope.
Yeah, hopefully turned off. But if you have this thing in your pocket and you think you're oppressed, you're very confused. We live in a time with such absurd freedoms in the West that are so beyond imagination of what people could only dream of 2 generations ago, even 1 generation ago, especially with this, that people now have a perceived oppression instead of a real oppression. So one of the things that I
Pause it
find
for
when I
one
go
second.
to...
Does he think that there are no cell phones in the East? I mean, he said like I don't.
Well, hey, not only I'm looking. In fact, I am looking this up right now because I did want to buy your Logic It, and I believe China has the 3rd highest concentration of cell phone use in the world. Number
They're
one,
super non-oppressed.
Yep.
Super freedom.
Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia.
Ultra freedom.
I'm trying so hard. Russia's up there.
If you've got a telegraph in your community, you're not oppressed.
Well, I don't know the number, but I know that a lot of Venezuelans have cells. So
okay,
devastating.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand what point is he trying to make?
He's so dumb. He's saying it's like the same argument as like, oh, poor people have refrigerators now, so they can't complain about anything ever. Like, if you have access to certain consumer goods, which are now very cheap to produce, you can't complain about economic or political oppression.
But was the problem with Solzhenitsyn that he didn't have like a phone? Like, I don't understand. Like,
They took away all of Solzhenitsyn's communication privileges.
Okay, but continue here.
If Solzhenitsyn was alive today, he would be on Rogan.
Maybe he'll do
Talking about why pussy riot.
They have the most
is
insufferable Twitter
disruptive.
Let's see if he does a reset. Because I just wonder like what everybody else in the room is going like. What? Okay, we go.
People now have a perceived oppression instead of a real oppression. So one of the things that I find
Pause
when
it.
I
Incidentally,
go to...
I should also say, I'm sorry, but like 1 out of every 4 of Dave Rubin's tweets is how YouTube is unsubscribing people from him, and we'll get to that because, but like literally, like every third tweet he puts out is a complaint to YouTube that he's being oppressed, that his subscribers are being underdone, or that Patreon is not doing it right, or the technology companies are. But go ahead.
Of 2 generations ago, even 1 generation ago, especially with this, that people now have a perceived oppression instead of a real oppression. So one of the things that I find when I go to college campuses is that these kids will protest and they'll scream and that everyone's alt-right and everyone's neo-Nazi and the rest of this. And I always find, all right, well, how do you break through to somebody like that? How do you actually, when they have, you've talked about this, when they have that look in their eye, truly a possessed look, and they're, it's this postmodern monster has become sort of a secular religion. And I think that's also one of the reasons why what Jordan's doing is resonating, because they've removed religion from the equation.
Pause it for 1 second. Look at Jordan Peterson's face. Do you think they're both looking at him and I just wonder what's going through their head? Peterson's just like, I'm making so much money, it doesn't matter that I
don't
tour
fuck
with
this
guy.
up for me.
Yeah, and the other guy's going like, oh my God, Jesus, how many followers does he have on YouTube? My Lord, what's going on in America? Good.
No meaning, and they put it all into this really competing set of ideas, what we call the oppression Olympics, where they're constantly competing for oppression because they believe that victimhood is virtue, and victimhood, of course, is not virtue. What's virtuous is getting your life in order and going out and doing something. So I'm always looking for a little trick to get through to these kids, and it's really hard because when they have that sort of glossed over zombie look, it's tough. And I found one trick that actually kind of works if you can get it to them in the most simple, personal way. And this particularly works in the United States, and I have no doubt that it would work here in Australia as well. I'll say to them, anyone in this room, does anyone in this room have it worse than their grandparents? Now, I've done this, 100 times probably. Nobody has ever raised their hand. Nobody ever. If you live in the United States, you basically, the only outsider case would be if your grandparents were oil barons or something like that, and then they lost all the money, in which case the leftists would actually love that too, because it would show that, that accumulated wealth doesn't stay beyond generations, so they're all about that, right? So
what? Yeah, that's the whole point of the leftist argument, is that sometimes fortunes are squandered. He caught that. Dude, I can't even. I can totally
but if you
see
can
why
do
you
something like that,
associate
if you
with
say,
him, because,
everyone
anybody sitting next to him looks like a galactic, intergenerational.
Let's hear just one more second.
In this room can do it. Can everyone picture their grandparents? Do you have it better or worse? Does anyone in here have it worse than their grandparents? And that shows you that it's a perceived oppression, not a real oppression.
Well, pause it. First off, generationally speaking, your generation is making less, relative to the cost of
My
living.
grandparents just got back from a cruise, so they're doing pretty well, actually.
Well, but your grandparents, when they were your age, when, of course, they
had a house.
Yeah,
when they had a house.
I'm doing considerably worse than my grandparents.
Well, also the other point.
But that's
is
that doesn't mean that you're oppressed. But
I'm doing better than my grandparents because I'm following a hero's arc journey. But no, the other thing that this really irritates me, because this the premise of all of these right-wing arguments, that it's if you can't point to another time in human history that's better than now, when coupled with the blind devotion to technological innovation, it's well, how about you just drop a little bit of that into the political and economic realm? And there's this whole concept of the idea of things actually getting better.
Yeah, it could just be bad all the way through.
And
I thought of that.
Really question as to whether these people that he's performing in front of all perceive themselves as oppressed. But
and why is he so obsessed with college campuses? All these people leave the children alone.
We will get to the colleges are the hot. Because this is just a genre of grift on the right.
It's I get older, they stay the same straw man.
Here is Dave Rubin again claiming to be oppressed by YouTube on Twitter. Portion of an email I just received from a viewer who I've gotten to know personally, who is a highly competent VC guy, not a bot or a fake account. And he writes, Hey, Dave. Hadn't seen your videos in a while. Search for them on YouTube. And sure enough, I was no longer subscribed to your channel. I am 100% sure I did not unsubscribe. Why would I do that? This is getting creepy, and this is not the first time either. I also found that I was unsubscribed from, and then he cut that off. So maybe it had a problem to do with him, but Dave makes it about himself. Hi, Team YouTube. Getting more of these than usual. I would be happy to email you, but I don't have a human contact at your company after 6 years and almost 1 million subscribers, despite constant unsubscribes. This is the biggest whiny, self-oppressed. I've never seen this. And then it all becomes clear on Dave Rubin's Reddit. I'm the one sending bullshit emails to Dave about not being able to watch his videos on YouTube. In case anyone's wondering, laugh my ass off.
Is that you, Sam?
No, it's not me.
That's a genius. That's you're a listener, though. Well done.
There you go. That's why, Dave. That's a mystery solved. That's why you're getting more than usual, because there are people on Reddit who are making fun of
If you have a YouTube channel and you think you're not oppressed, you're very confused.
Exactly, right? Like, this guy's so talking
If you
about
have a phone, you're not oppressed. If you
There's
have a
no-
YouTube channel, likely you are.
Exactly. It's unbelievable how this guy moves through just the world completely unawares. Honestly, I think there's some grifters out there who are conscious of their grift, but I really feel like Dave is just so unself-aware and just guided by where he smells the money, and he thinks that's truth, right? He's in the jet stream. That's basically what it is.
I mean, but I guess maybe if your grandparents had an oil company and they lost, but I guess the left would like that because they like when dukes and barons gamble away their fortunes at casinos.
The only
and
way,
Maldives. That's what being a leftist
yeah, the only
is.
way I can conceive of an older generation having more material wealth than younger generation is some sort of weird oil baron scenario.
I always try to be fair, so I always ask Ben Shapiro about the oil baron.
I am quite convinced when he gets back from this trip, there's going to be a lot of like, wow, you don't really realize how hard you're hit by the jet lag until you come back. Really, that jet lag was really tough. Really tough. Oh my God. Well, there he is. Huge success on YouTube, folks. Welcome to it.
Yeah, the cream rises to the top.
Exactly.
I just we had a couple of months where the TMBS YouTube channel wasn't being monetized. It's a fraction of the size of Rubin's. And I'm, it's not huge, but obviously paying somebody to do it, actually just like losing money. Eventually, and we didn't even allege a conspiracy. We were basically just like, this is bullshit.
They're cucks.
They're cucks. Go bother them on Twitter. But this guy does seem to spend like a very significant amount of his online time, or like, you only think that's homophobia.
Talk about
or,
honestly,
YouTube's hurting me.
Feelings of oppression. That's all. I mean, we've talked about this many times. How aggrievement seems to drive the conservative mind. Now I know Dave he's in a gay marriage. He's against the death penalty.
It's not really going to work.
He's
I'm
very
gay.
begrudgingly pro-choice, but he's having to qualify that because liberals are pro-murder outside of the womb.
Exactly.
And he used to be for single payer until he found out that was at odds with the smaller government.
There was other, but then I read.
I didn't realize that. I
didn't
dig into that whole.
I was in a
payer.
really serious. I was at a John Stuart Mill marathon, and I was thinking so hard because I was just engaging the ideas, and then it just.
My buddy Brett was telling me that Evergreen State is making conservative students turn in their phones at the beginning of the semester
to oppress them. All right. And so speaking of college campuses.
So then after I read John Stuart Mill, I didn't support giving people vouchers to buy insurance anymore, which is, of course, single payer.
There's two groups of people in the country who have the most self-aggrievement possible and do it under the guise that they are aggrieved because of how much aggrievement other people feel. And that is, of course, almost anyone who identifies as conservative or a classical liberal, and comedians who, for some reason, can't get booked at colleges anymore, or college students don't like their comedy. And so, of course, it's not, oh, they don't like my comedy, they don't think I'm funny. It's that society has gone off the rails because I don't get the same amount of laughs at colleges that I used to with my stale material. Well, we held this for today because Michael's such a fan of the Bodega Boys.
I love these guys.
But they now have a show on Showtime, right? It's a nightly show.
I mean, on Showtime.
No, it's
I think
Thursdays.
it's not. Yeah,
It's not daily?
Once a week. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And
Ooh, that would be exhausting.
And they they're on this.
This is Hot Ones, a Complex magazine where they eat sort of spicy food and talk.
There you go. So here's the Bodega Boys on Hot Ones, talking about PC culture, and their comedy is
not PC.
Not PC.
So for years, you guys have riffed on trending topics on a hot mic without much of a filter. Why do you think you've avoided the problematic police, or at least in a big PR disaster way? Is the key, Jesus, to just say allegedly and qualify everything that way?
I think it's more we self-center. Yeah. There's certain things you know that you could have gotten away with saying in 09 that you should not even formally as a sentence in your head.
Don't even put it in your drafts.
Okay?
You know what I'm saying? Don't even try it.
If you watch the progression of our comedy, there's certain jokes we used to do that we won't do anymore. Because as we've experienced the world and we've come across different people, we realize that the humor hits differently, that a certain joke that might have been funny 4 years ago, like you actually meet a person from this specific group and you're like, oh shit, like I didn't even know that was offensive.
Oh.
Like, guess we were from the Bronx, it's like, suck my dick, and all that shit. But we're not in the crosshairs of PC culture like that because we're not, like, fighting against it. Like,
We're not out there like, oh, PC culture.
Yeah, you can't say what you want anymore.
You can't say what you want anymore. Nah, you can say what you want. You just got to be funny about it and, like, smart about it and approach it the right way.
And don't just say something for shock value. Because that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people are just like, oh, you're offended? Oh, I triggered you,
sorry,
libs. Like,
triggered you, libtard. You're like, nah.
And you know, like we say, and there's people who are selling out arenas doing that, but it's just like, at the end of the day, what's the expectancy on that? How long can you do that for?
I mean, all of this stuff that they're saying is really fairly basic, but somehow seems to escape the vast majority of, well, and I shouldn't say the vast majority of comedians. The vast majority of comedians are fine. It's just like, but the ones that we hear piercing through, the biggest complaints, you know, Jerry Seinfeld, when he's not driving around, you know, showing off his fleet of cars, is complaining that colleges are just, they don't like my gay king character anymore. Like, it's unbelievable.
And what's so funny about it, though, is like it also just shows the misunderstanding of it, because I can guarantee you that listening to a Bodega Boys podcast, if one were to listen, because I do think that there are scolds, if we want to use that word, and they exist in all quadrants. There are people who I would say are lefty squares who are annoying about this stuff. I make no bones about it. There are obviously people who are religious, people who are right-wing, people, whatever.
And people who have legitimate gripes as well. No?
That's not what I'm talking about. But if you listen to Bodega Boys, you will find infinite more grounds to potentially get, bothered by something than anything Jerry Seinfeld has probably done, other than you just sort of being like, yeah, he just kind of seems like an asshole, right? Like, that's what's... He's not hitting not because of what the terrain he's going after. He's not hitting because a 19-year-old is like, you mean that like eating French toast makes you gay? And that's like, so you're not Louis the 14th? Like, what?
Well,
what did you play? What was it?
So you're not allowed to make fun of anybody ever.
It also depends if it's coming from a place of good faith or bad faith. right?
That's
And
partially what they're saying
yeah,
there, and
yeah,
I think their
empathy,
you know, and where they're coming from comes through. I mean, I think one of the reasons. I mean, you know this better than me, Sam, because I don't know as much of the show as you. But I think one of the reasons that Howard Stern has kind of survived is because he wasn't like he was very problematic, whatever the word you want to use, but he didn't seem to have like a kind of malicious dimension to it.
Well, it was also,
and it was satiric.
And there's a certain level of trust that you build with your audience when they feel like they know you, and maybe they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And if you ever do say something that maybe oversteps the line or hurts people's feelings, like, you can have the critical distance on yourself to be like, all right, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Right. I don't think the problem is that, I don't think that the idea is that people should, necessarily self-censor all the time so they never step on a landmine. It's how you react to when you find out that this is a landmine, which is what they're saying.
And there's so much context involved too. Like I've talked a lot about this with Jake Flores, the comedian and podcaster and friend. Like, so much of it is contingent on context and on who you are and on where you're coming from. Like Louis C.K., people used to give him the benefit of the doubt, and now they don't anymore, and there's no going back.
Right, and this is not a concept that escapes comedians at all. I mean, whether it's the broader context that some people, you know, you go up, you see a stand-up, you don't necessarily know anything about them other than what they're presenting, but you have there are visual cues, and then there are other, you know, the context of the jokes and whatnot. But the bottom line is like, this is nothing new. And the idea that some people find some jokes offensive and some don't on others. And if people in society are becoming more aware of the sensitivities of people who are not exactly like them, like you've always had to censor to a certain extent, white sensibility, or certain narrow sensibility. It's just that it was one that was widely accepted and unchallenged. And to a certain extent, the sensibility is broadened, that people are just more sensitive to what other people are sensitive about. And so, the idea that this is in some way like inhibiting comedy, this is a perfect example of why that's not the case. Let's go to the phones. We got a little time here. Calling from a 571 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Five 7-1. I mean, I hear that person breathing. They fell asleep.
ASMR.
Calling from a 708 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. This is Dragon Slayer 19 calling from the Chicagoland area. How is everyone today?
Dragon Slayer 19. How are you? What's on your mind?
I'm pretty good. I just wanted to quickly promote two things. First off, the annual Socialism Conference just announced some details. So everyone should hold the date for July 4th through July 7th. It's being held in Chicago. It's a conference, if some people might remember, that Jamie went to last year. Has a lot of good topics like labor history, Marxist traditions, queer activism. And one of the great things last year was hearing from a bunch of the teachers who organized and participated in the wildcat strikes. And so a bunch of leftist best people are going, and hopefully others will go. And if you want more details, you can check out socialismconference.org.
Okay.
It was very, very cool. I actually found multiple guests for the Antifada from all of the interesting talks that they had there.
Are you going this year?
That's a good question. Maybe.
Appreciate the call, Dragon Slayer.
One more thing, Spam.
Okay.
Nope, one more thing. So the other big thing I wanted to promote, and I feel this is somewhat criminally unpromoted, is longtime listeners of the show will know that there's a frequent caller named Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
And what some people might not know is that Ronald Reagan has a podcast called Redirect: Immigration Law and Perspective.
It's excellent.
That he co-hosts with a immigration attorney named Matthew Archambault. Now, in addition to all the great content that they have, providing context on like lots of stuff on like immigration law, asylum cases, refugees, what like the border wall would actually mean, is they recently put up a goal for having, if they can get 100 patrons, they will take on a pro bono asylum case from the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. Now, literally as I was on hold for this call, they just reached 100 patrons. Now, it's great that they're able to reach this goal, but I think that the MR audience and associated people can get that goal at least to 200, 300, or even 500.
Okay,
and so I want everybody to go out and join patreon.com/redirect. Give some money to Ray Gun for a great cause. Mindy shares some stuff. Sarah Silverman, I saw that you shared a video of MR lately. If you could promote this, that'd be really great. Because that's like the power of independent media, is us sharing it, joining in great causes like this. So anyways, thank you for the time. Left is best.
Thank you, Dragon Slayer. It's patreon.com/redirect.
I am a proud and enjoying patron, and just really, immigration law and the broader
Did you just, what happened to your?
Sorry, immigration law and the broader immigration system, is one of the most important things happening in the country today, obviously.
I like the celeb interviews.
Yes.
The celeb interview is great. Calling from a 266 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? (266)
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, right. You said 266. That's not my area code, so I assumed you were referring to somebody else.
Well, that's sorry about that. You calling on Skype? 266 is usually a Skype number.
No,
it doesn't
I'm
matter.
calling from my mobile in the UK.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Well, I just wanted to say I completely agree with what Jamie said yesterday about means testing. I've been.
I don't disagree with. I didn't disagree with the idea of means testing, but it is just simply not the definition of means testing to have a sliding scale.
All right, they're testing your means, though.
Well, I understand, but means testing means something
All right,
specific.
That's kind of a pedantic point. Like, you know what I meant.
Well, but
anyway, that's just a side comment. I've been meaning to phone you and talk about the Crimea for a while, where I've spent a certain amount of time, but that does not, unfortunately, appear to be the priority at the moment. I phoned you once before regarding allegations of sort of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and then there was this recent Ilhan Omar thing that you guys had, and I've really been trying to get my head around this, and I kind of would appreciate your insight, because I'm not Jewish, you're Jewish, you probably have a better insight than I do, but I'm trying to understand what the thought process is fundamentally behind the kind of perspectives that some people sort of on the Jewish right, I suppose you'd call it, have. And the only thing I can understand, this is very simplistic and crude, is that it must relate to the Holocaust, and that this idea that Israel is a Jewish safe haven. It's a place in the world where if the shit hits the fan, if there's another Hitler, Jews can go and be safe.
Right.
So if you criticize Israel, really what you're doing is attacking Jewish safety. You're attacking, and
I have had
so
that framed to me
Jewish
exactly
safety,
that way by people. Sorry.
Yeah, and if you're attacking Jewish safety, well, then you're being anti-Semitic, And so really criticizing Israel, this is a crude presentation, could be deemed as anti-Semitic. Now, obviously, if you're terrified that they're out to get you, and that you're wondering every moment that there's going to be some sort of Nazi who's going to grab you and do something horrible to you, then I suppose it would make sense that you would be defending Israel with everything you've got, Now, so, I don't know. Maybe that's a really crude, simplistic attitude, and maybe it's more to do with tribalism and nationalism. I don't know.
I think it's.
But
I don't think
I
they're
try and
mutually.
understand-
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I don't think they're necessarily the same for everybody. But I think for certainly a percentage of for a small, and I think it's a relatively small percentage now, and it gets smaller. I think with greater distance from the Holocaust. But I think there's definitely. I think that perspective is accurate. I also think in some instances it's just racist. Jews can be racist as well.
Of course, anybody can be racist.
Right, exactly. And I think that is from the right. I think that is I think that's a good assessment.
Yeah, I have had
Yeah, and
several
I think,
conversations with a Zionist friend who I love very much, but our worldviews are fundamentally not reconcilable. And, a lot of these folks are liberal on other things, and he is as well. But when it comes to that, you end up justifying all sorts of atrocities. But he says, Jamie, you don't understand. Anti-Semitism is one of the oldest forces in the world. He has this trans-historical view of it, and we are never going to be safe. And that's why we need a Jewish state with nukes and tons of military aid.
Yeah. But this idea of destiny is very dangerous. We're destined to be persecuted. I mean, that's almost a mythological perspective rather than
absolutely.
There is. It's not hard to find a historical precedent, right?
Yeah, but there's a material basis. It's not just this evil that lurks in the hearts of humanity.
Well, it's been quite coincidental. It's not a question of there's an evil that exists in humanity, but that material basis has crept up, throughout centuries. So there is. I think there is. Listen, I think there is. There is. Some precedence. It's not a completely irrational fear. It's not like anti-Semitism.
Certainly not.
Right. I think.
I think
it doesn't mean that they're acting upon it in the correct way. But go ahead. So what's your point?
Oh,
was that it?
My point.
Yeah.
Wasn't that?
No. I have plenty more to say. I suppose. It would seem to me that the root of a lot of anti-Semitism just simply comes from the fact that Jews have been a minority in many countries, and minorities are always persecuted.
Yeah.
Always have been historically. So, and minorities, have different identities, whether they be gypsies or Jews or whatever. People persecute minorities. That's human societies, and so I'm not sure that it's. I think it's dangerous to view it as something that's intrinsically must and always be about Jews that they will be persecuted. I think that's a very
no. I think you're right. I think I think it has to do with the minority status, but I think that there's a sense that I'm taking devil's advocate here, right? I'm taking a position that's not necessarily mine, but I think Jews are always going to be in the minority. Significant minority. To the extent that they have power in society, there's also a lot of precedent for them having power in society, nominally speaking, but not enough to change things, to stop something when things go south. Essentially, when things take a bad turn. This is part of. Purim is coming up in like a week, I think, or two. And that's the story of Purim, right? A well-positioned Jew was up there, had to save the Jews from all getting killed, by Haman, I think it is. I'm not quite up on it, but it's been a while. But look,
my biblical knowledge is
there is a narrative. I don't know that it's, to the extent that it's unique narrative, it's that it's documented. Whether it's not, these are not notarized documents, but there is a history that, and part of the Jewish tradition is to be well aware of the history, so the sensitivity is there to it as well. So.
And today, I mean, in addition, though, to the obvious point that, of course, while all of that is true, that you still have to be able to just talk about a nation state objectively, I really wonder, I mean, like, I think today, and I'll just put this on the table because it's a much broader conversation, but like, if you were in some type of situation of needing to return to Israel, like let's not create some ultra dramatic scenario, but like one that's maybe more plausible, that you wanted to leave a place like, I don't know, France. I'm not even sure about that, frankly, but let's just say that. But you still were, maybe you were even religious, but you were pretty left, and you had some, had some sort of values that might have been reflected potentially, at least in a certain view of Israel from the 60s or 70s. I mean, Israel today, like what Netanyahu just did in terms of like the coalition partners, that even more extreme parties. My point that I'm getting to in a long-winded way is, I don't even think you could think of Israel as a state that is in any way remotely for all Jews today.
Yeah,
it's such a far right, such an increasingly narrow place.
Yeah,
with
and
its
that's
own like internal. I mean, look, it's a free speech laws. I mean, this stuff is the guy who Joe Kramer, I think, wrote a book about how the occupation had traveled home, and I think it's like not only untenable, obviously first and foremost with the occupation, but just like in terms of what it even represents for. I mean, say just like left or cosmopolitan.
I don't know. If you're living in an Eastern European town and you're one of the few Jews that are left there and they're burning,
well, no doubt about that.
No doubt about
that. No doubt about that. But that's why I picked a more kind of neutral example.
Yeah, and that's where ethno-nationalism always leads you. You can be, and this is why if I were ever going to pull a Dave Rubin and decide to be a right-wing YouTuber and get paid for it, that would be the most believable route that I would go. Get into Zionism, which is fundamentally incompatible with socialism, right? Because if you believe that humanity is fundamentally
there
tribal,
might be others who have a different view of that.
Well, no. Like if
like
you
the
believe
founders of Israel.
If you believe that humanity is fundamentally
like the
tribal,
socialists who founded Israel may disagree a little bit.
Oh my God. Yeah, you
Have
think
you seen
that
the documentary? Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt
Our
you?
Gentile friend is still listening to this Jewish nonsense.
Guys are everywhere.
Is this like a field trip for you, sir?
Have you seen the documentary?
What documentary?
The Lobby. About there's a documentary called The Lobby, an Al Jazeera documentary called The Lobby, about the
it was based
Israel
on an
lobby
article or
in the
book.
Labour Party
Yeah.
in the UK.
Oh no, I didn't know about
And
it.
I found, I mean, it. Have you seen that? Any of
No.
you?
No.
Hello?
No, haven't
No.
seen it.
Yeah, well, it's on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. Just look for The Lobby. I mean, it's quite interesting because it's what do you call it? Not undercover, but it's an investigative reporter, and it's all really sort of live filming.
Right.
So it's all primary evidence, and it was just interesting because it might. I only saw it recently, but give some insights about sort of allegations of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and my father's a Labour Party member, and he goes regularly to meetings, and I mean his sense is that this discussion of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is so closely related to the question of Israel.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Not.
But all right, listen, I appreciate the call.
Can I finish what I was saying earlier? Which is that if you believe humanity is fundamentally tribal, as Zionists do, you believe that socialism is not possible. The brotherhood of humanity is not possible. Anyone who tries to do it is going to cause a atrocious bloodbath. The best you can hope for is to take care of your own people. And that's why Zionists end up going down some very bad roads and supporting some really atrocious right-wing policies. Because if you really believe that, then anything the state of Israel does is justified.
Appreciate the phone call. Well, if you believe that that there's a fundamental tribalism, that anything is justified?
Yeah. If you believe the most important thing is taking care of your own people, then it has very bad implications. And it's a huge reason why it's not just that Jeremy Corbyn, liked anti-Semitic painting on Facebook by mistake. Like, it goes much deeper than that. And the Zionist critique of socialism is like a very fundamental one. They cannot be reconciled.
I mean, the socialists who founded Israel probably had some, at least, basis for their perspective that there was certain tribalistic elements going on.
Wasn't that sort of like the nationalism conversation? Like certain nationalisms I guess a third world nationalism, you'd call it, being anti-imperial power. Like you can make the case for a nationalism in that sense.
There's great,
but there's
ultimately a road to go down.
Yeah, there's gradations.
Like, yes,
of everything.
I find it much more understable when people are
But
nationalistic
you know
as a response to
Jamie,
oppression.
You shouldn't like. I'm more on your side of this, but I wouldn't like declare what something is or isn't in like a categorical way when it just manifests in so many different ways, including by people who identify their own projects as that. I think that's where the tension is.
Like, I think there's no doubt that the vision of those people who founded, I would even suggest the majority of people who founded, I don't know if it's fair to say the majority, but certainly a significant percentage of the people who founded Israel, I think their vision has gone off the rails. And maybe it's because you can't establish a country with that agenda.
Well, I think it's more.
I don't know.
I think it's more material.
Israel had actually.
I think it's more material, right?
Been,
you can't. It's because it was fundamentally off the rails because fundamentally it required the uprooting and displacement.
What I was just about to say.
Okay,
like
then we're on
Israel,
the same.
If they'd founded Israel, like in with all due respect, North Dakota,
right?
I think,
he would have displaced Matt's grandparents, and then he would have a better life than them.
I think more Jews should know about the Missouri River.
Yeah, but to extrapolate it even further, like nationalism it's a negative force in the world.
I mean, I think broadly speaking,
and we're never going to get socialism if everybody's a nationalist, and no matter where you are. I think, the nationalism of imperial powers could go first, and then maybe the nationalism of colonized peoples that arose in response to that could go second.
Yes. I mean, I think that's probably one of the reasons why I don't think that we're going to get the type of socialism that you're talking about. But who knows? Maybe when we're all orbs. I'm not sure.
I'm going to convince you someday. It's
yes,
fine.
when
I'm not
when I
worried.
am not of a bot, like I'm just a floating orb. I mean, I'm just, I guess, slightly cynical about humanity in that respect. Calling from 405 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Gregory from Oklahoma.
Gregory, what's happening?
Breath of fresh air.
Oh, wow. I'm good. My birthday was it was 3 weeks ago from today.
All right. Well, congratulations.
Happy birthday.
How
Happy
old
birthday.
are you now?
I turned 51. No, I'm kidding. I turned 21.
21. Well, there you go. You're going.
Did you don't overdo it, but did you get a drink?
No, I haven't drank at all yet.
All right. Well, good for you, Gregory.
Yeah, keep
You
it
got-
that
It's
way.
all ahead of you. It's
Nah,
all
come
ahead of
on,
you. All right.
Gregory.
What's on your mind? We just got a couple of minutes. What's on your mind?
Damn it. I've totally forgot what I was going to talk. No, I'm kidding. What was it? Fuck. Damn it. I lost what I was going to talk about. Something about Oklahoma. Like, our congressperson that we elected, that's a Democrat, she's been voting with Republicans a lot and telling us that rich people shouldn't have higher taxes and stuff. Very disappointing.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's not a lot of hope for the state. And, we have a Trump mini-me as governor. And
Well, Gregory, I
not
mean,
great.
maybe it's time we next time you call into the show, you should be Gregory from, I don't know,
another state.
New Jersey. Or,
No, I love Oklahoma. I'm not going to leave Oklahoma.
keep working on it,
I love
man.
the state.
Appreciate the call.
All right.
Texas
Bye.
is right there.
Thanks. Happy birthday. All right, the final call of the day. You calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Mindy. How are you?
Yeah. Knock it out, Mindy.
First of all, hi, Michael. I'm glad
Hey.
you guys are back. I was like so depressed last week
I understand.
when you're away. I didn't call about this subject, but since the guy called about it, I just wanted to say something to Jamie about the Zionist people. You cannot talk to them. They're fucking crazy. They're Republicans. Even the Democrat. Well, I don't even think you could be a Democrat and be a Zionist.
It's
but
so hard.
I mean,
Whoa! Did you hear that, Sam? She flipped the script on that.
What?
Forget being a socialist
No,
and being a Zionist. You can't be a Democrat and be a Zionist, bro.
Oh,
that'd
be news to Chuck Schumer. Yeah.
Spitting bars.
what?
Mindy, I love
No,
you.
I
That's
mean,
what.
these-
Go ahead.
I love you too. I mean, it's such a cult that when they have companies that recruit children to go to Birthright. Like, it's the fucking Birthright. They're Americans. They're not Israelites. I mean, everybody my kids knew had to go on Birthright when they're 25. They went once. They went twice. My son called me from Israel. He said, I don't get this shit. They're like sleeping in the desert. Like, it's hot. There's camels. It sucks. I want to come home. Anyway, so that's my Israel story. But no, it's a cult. I believe it's a cult. Do you think it's a cult?
I mean, I think at this stage, we're in late stage Zionism. I think is pretty problematic. I think it's pretty problematic.
Right. So that's my feeling on that. The other thing is, I understand and am happy for all you guys that are loving your Bernie. And I think if Bernie gets the nomination, I believe that everybody will jump on the bandwagon and he will win over Trump. And I get all that, but I'm torn because I'm a woman and I'm a middle-aged woman and I want to see a woman president. And I think that some of these other candidates are starting to adopt his policies, and I don't think. Okay, so yell at me. I want a woman.
Right. I mean,
So do
I
you.
think
Hey,
that's-
hey, Mindy. No, this is
Let me
serious.
just-
Which one do you think is most mimicking those policies?
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
And and I know you're really down on Kamala, and I get it, but they're pushing them so far to the left. Everyone is pushing them to say things like yesterday, Kamala had to say that Trump was a racist. Like, she had to publicly say it. I mean, we're pushing them so far to the left that I think when this whole thing gets done, and we do have a candidate, I think they're not going to be a middle-of-the-road moderate like a Joe Biden. I think we're pushing them very far to the left, and I think that's a good thing.
All right. The only thing
My
I would say
feeling-
is I think it's a perfectly legitimate, obviously, desire, and I think it would be helpful to have a woman president, and certainly, I think it's important for women, frankly, and I think it would have to some degree at least a step towards a material benefit for women. But when you talk about pushing them to the left, understand it's a two-step process, right? It's one thing to get people to position themselves in the context of a campaign to the left, and I definitely think that has some actual material implications. But you got to take that next step, and the depth of that is a function of how strongly people are, how strongly the constituency continues to push them, and how much of that constituency is interested in pushing them. So in other words, if you're a Kamala supporter, okay, and you are happy that she's being pushed to the left on these issues, you can also look around the room, metaphorically, at your other Kamala supporters and ask yourself, are they going to be here after she's elected to continue to hold her feet to the fire about these things? And that, that is a function of how much she's going out there and not following on these positions, but leading on them. You know, some certainly will have a residual. You know, Obama did not run on marriage equality. He ran against it. And he was pushed. He was not promoting DACA when he got elected. He was pushed. But, you know, in these broad-based sort of...
Well, he was scared to do anything. He was scared to do anything. I mean, he just...
I don't think it was just he was scared.
fact-
I think in those instances, actually, to be honest with you, in those instances, the ones that he changed, I think he was initially scared. In fact, you know, I mean, it was supposedly off the record, but at this point, I don't think it's really terribly relevant. But I was in a room with him and about 10 other people when he was talking about that very issue of marriage equality. And for him, it was a calculation. And I think he was scared. And I think that pressure, you know, changed him and gave him courage. But I'm not sure, you know, on things like the banking, you know, on the way that he responded to the banking crisis, I don't think he was scared. I think he just was listening to different people and had a different worldview. And so, you know, it's those type of things that I think where there's that hesitation. But, you know, you support Kamala, you support Bernie. I mean, people make their own assessments.
No. I really want a woman. Like, I don't want Tulsi Gabbard. I won't vote for her. I mean, I don't know the whole thing with Amy Klobuchar right now. I mean, she just sounds like a bitch, but, like, what the fuck?
She does, doesn't
like, that,
she?
That could... What?
Hey, Mindy.
I said she does, doesn't she?
Mindy.
But like I
Well,
said
I
earlier,
mean, so if the only thing they can come up with is that she ate a salad with a comb.
oh no, that was
more.
the story they released
When I was in
after the fact to
college.
like soften her image for like throwing binders and chairs at people. But
Getting
no,
people getting job offers rescinded, which is really evil.
She was a bad boss. So, Mindy, I agree with you. Like I was saying earlier, I also want to see a woman president. I think it's bad that we haven't had one yet. But I also want single-payer health care and, you know, ultimately a national health service. I also want a job guarantee. I also want all these really good, progressive, I guess, social democratic programs. And I think Bernie Sanders is the one who's the most likely to get us those things. And part of that is because he understands, you know, he's always talking about how real change comes from the bottom up, not the top down. And, you know, his whole slogan is not me, us. And, you know, Obama talked a lot about that stuff too, but Bernie really means it. And I think he understands that better than anyone. And I think this is something that the sort of hard socialist left can ally with the liberal left on right now, because we all want the same reforms. And he also knows that if you want to get anything halfway decent, you have to shoot really high. So for all of those reasons, and foreign policy is a whole other thing on which he's much better than Warren. But for all of those reasons, I just think he's the best choice right now.
I for one will not be unhappy at all if Elizabeth Warren ends up being the nominee. There's a lot of policies of hers that I like, and I think in terms of, you know, more than just about anybody, at least off the top of my head in the race, I think she, in terms of like actual functioning as a president, in terms of executive skills, I think she has shown her skills in that arena more than anyone else, frankly.
Yeah, but Kamala's faking everyone out. I mean, I don't know if she's faking everyone out, but she seems to be the one. Look, I don't care if it's Warren or Kamala. I don't care. I would like a woman Bernie. I mean, a Jewish old woman Bernie would be great. I mean, but
Mindy, what are you trying to tell
She wants
us?
Bella Abzug to come back from the dead, right?
Are you trying to announce something right now?
No. Really? With the stuff. Well, actually, I was going to say with the stuff in my past, I couldn't get elected, but then Trump got elected. So
yeah, who
I guess
cares?
it's
All
free
bets
reign
are
for
off.
everybody.
All right. Well, listen, Mindy.
And I'm not that old, Jamie. I'm not that old.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Mindy, you mean you want to make a fresh start as a dynamic young Congress? Yeah, this is a Justice Democrat.
Yeah.
Mindy, when you're ready, when you are
yet.
ready
I'll
to
be 60
announce,
in May.
make sure you do it here. All right. Gotta jump.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Mindy.
the call.
Love you guys. Bye, Michael.
Bye.
Bye, Jamie.
Bye. We love you too.
All right,
All love.
a couple IMs, and we're out of here. Congressional baseball fan, these people attacking Bernie for a few flights sound like they could learn a thing or two about things that fly, and they start with catching a few fly balls out in deep left field. Secret identity politics. Hello, is this me? This one's for Michael. If pointing one flaw in his argument is enough to make Tucker lose his shit, what is Mark Blythe doing? I really like Blythe, and I get that he's spreading the good word, but is this regular gig more valuable than exposing Tucker as a nervous dipshit? Jordan Peterson's face is telling Dave Rubin to get his bloody name out of your mouth, you lick spittle. Thames Darwin, welcome back, Sam et al. I've been missing the live show on Mondays this semester since I have a class until 2:30. That said, I've been making a pretty clear observation of a serious problem confirmed by the presence of Blake on the line when I left class yesterday. So my request is this. Can you screen the calls to put the douchebags on while I'm in class, at least on Mondays? Otherwise, love the show. Chris Lapaco, Amy Klobuchar eats with a comb. Yellow Snetter, I'm still mad at Reagan for stealing my thunder by having the nerve to invade Grenada on the day I was born. Yellow Snow Eater. Brother from Brooklyn, I think Bernie has blind spots regarding black-specific policies like reparations. I saw a clip of him dismissing a black woman who wanted further details on his stance on that. Psychedelic Quaker, can Jamie provide a source for her claim that opposition leader prevented the UN from monitoring the Venezuelan election?
Yeah, I believe I saw it on Reuters.
Reuters. South China Sea. LOL. Nobody remembers Jim Webb. Mission complete. DK in Chicago. Hey, guys, it's election day in Chicago. Our mayoral election is crap. Shoot. But the anyone but Daley, there are also 4 great DSA challengers for city council, along with the great incumbent Carla Rosa. Plus, Amaya Pawar is a front runner for treasurer explicitly on the issue of creating a public bank, which is huge. It could make waves nationally. Great. Michael from MA, is there something fitting about conservatives and Hillary's staff trying to use the same type of attack on Bernie that was attempted on Pelosi and Al Gore? Kwame Kwasset, Omigi, you guys are so damn much. Please never leave again. Oh, I missed you so much. OMG. Okay. TMSB is my jam, or TMBS. When is new dork coming back from vacation? We'll see about that. Turangalia. I can't make that out. I love Sarah Palin. Bernie didn't have a good response to Wolf's point on taxes. If we're raised, tax avoidance would also increase. As an alt-centrist capitalist, that's why I think we should hear out Schultz before we make a final judgment on him. He said one of his biggest issues is tax reform. We lose at least between 200 to 400 per year because of tax avoidance and tax evasion. Well, here's what you would do. Here's what I would start. Fund the IRS. Yeah. The amount of cuts that the IRS as a policing organization has suffered, and I don't mean locking people up, I mean investigatory, has been shocking. So the idea that if we raise taxes, more rich people are going to evade taxes, I have a solution for that. It's called fund the IRS.
Yeah, and don't take Howard Schultz at face value when he talks about tax reform.
Believe. All right.
I
3
thought
more.
that was a joke.
Train Boy, have you talked about what's going on in Israel with Bibi forging an electoral coalition with the far right Kahanist party? We haven't. Adam from Philadelphia, pick up the phone. If you don't, you're a coward. Haha, just kidding. I will do it next time. Sorry. And Space Ghost, climate denialism is everywhere. People can swear up and down they accept scientific consensus on climate change. If they're not willing to accept policy solutions fitting to the scale and urgency of the problem, then they are in denial of the problem, period.
Right.
All right, folks,
Right.
see you
Oh, sorry. Vote for Nomiki if you're in New York City. It's election day today.
tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I was the truth in the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101